Welcome back in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365. Getting ready for the Week 6 matchup, Eagles versus Browns, a 1 p.m. game at the Link on Sunday. If anybody's going down, please drop it in the chat. Love to see what of JAKIB Nation, who's going down to the game. It is a home game, second home game at the Link this year. Should be a good one. We'll see if Eagles can get back on track. John, I want to talk a little bit about offense. Before I do that, Jarrell checks in, John, and Jarrell says, if y'all are in Florida like me, stay safe. Jarrell, I'll echo that. I got some family down in Florida, obviously, so definitely stay safe. That hurricane is picking up steam, so everybody stay safe. I know we have, John, our third most popular destination of listeners outside of Pennsylvania and New Jersey is Florida. So everybody, all of our listeners,
get out of Tampa. The Bucks already got out.
Yeah, if you're in Tampa, man, you got to get out. Tampa's going to be bad. So I have some family down in Naples, and then I have some family in Orlando. So it's kind of going right through there. So we've been in communication with them, trying to see what's going on. So hopefully everybody in Florida stays safe, man. Obviously, don't want to see any more devastation like you did from the last Hurricane Helene that just rolled through. So hopefully everybody stays safe. Johnny Mac, let's talk some Eagles offense, man. I have a wide point of view question for you before we get into some of the nitty gritty. Do you see any similarities or some of the same play calls from the 2023 offense to the 2024 offense? And when I say that, I mean, you see a lot of people saying, oh, this is still Nick's offense. Yeah. And I know it's not. I'm not saying it's Nick's offense, but I'm saying, do you see similarities in the two of them that you didn't expect to see through the first 5 weeks of the season?
No, because you have the same quarterback. So, I mean, that's the one thing where I think really people don't get. Like Kellen Moore wasn't coming in here and turning Jalen Hurts into some, new quarterback who does new things and was always going to default to what he does best, which is why the Eagles played offense the way they played offense. That's generally what you try to do. I think, a lot of the motion stuff was the biggest red herring. Anybody who listens to this show knows I've been saying that for a very long time. Because number one, it's in vogue around the NFL, so that's part of it. So people think it's successful because everybody uses it. Really, everybody uses it because there's so many coaches on the tree that uses it, the Shanahan Kubiak tree. So it's sort of like the Big Fangio offense where everybody copycats. So you have Miami with Mike McDaniel, you have Green Bay with Matt LaFleur. You have now Atlanta with Zach Robinson, who comes from the Rams, and Sean McVay. You have San Francisco, obviously, with Kyle Shanahan. You have the Rams with Sean McVay, and on and on and on. You have all these teams that use the same kind of scheme. Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell's another one on. So you get my point from that perspective. So those are all the top motion teams. Now, typically, Kellen's a guy who likes motion, likes it. First press conference, asked him. His dad liked it. He likes it. That's why he uses it more than being a strict Shanahan type guy. And I think people saw, I think Seth Walder put it out after the fourth game and saw the Eagles were 19th. In motion, said, see, that's Nick Sirianni taking over. What they missed is, the Eagles were 32nd last year and are up over 100% in motion from what they were last year. Still, even though Kellen Moore's down, that's how far up they're up in motion rate. However, he does not have a quarterback, Kellen Moore I'm talking about, who is comfortable with it. So, and you also don't have it's a very small sample size. And the fourth game, you didn't have your receivers to run it with AJ and Devontae.
Right.
So who'd you have out there? You had John Dodson, who just got here, John Ross, who got here off the street, along, with guys who aren't used to playing. So that affects it as well. So way overblown that people look at a chart and say, and even with all that, they're still up over 100%. But one of the things, like in the London game this week, Aaron Rodgers does not like motion. Phillip Rivers does not like motion, which is where Nick started understanding those types of quarterbacks and what they want formationally to get information. There are more than one way to do things in the NFL. And it generally comes down to what your quarterback likes, what your quarterback wants. And if anything, the Eagles seem to be straddling the fence. Because of what happened at the end of last year. And now it's in the middle. And they're trying to get Jalen Hurts up to speed with what Kellen Moore likes versus what he was successful with in the past, and trying to get back to executing that properly. And you get some ugliness. But bottom line is, to James's point earlier, when Lane Johnson gets back on the field, A.J. Brown gets back on the field, Devontae Smith gets back on the field, you're all going to be fine because it's going to look fine. I'm not saying we're not going to sit here and nitpick, but it's going to look good because they're going to have a top 5 offense, barring more injuries.
Yeah, we're going to dive into that real quick more. Just to comment on the motion. John, did you happen to see Luke Kuechly on with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks talking about motion?
I did not, but Luke
I should have sent you it because it was really good. But he basically said what you say about motion with the way the Eagles are using it. But then he also said, fast motion at the snap, which is what he used, and you'd have to explain exactly what he means, with dynamic weapons is a nightmare for linebackers and nickel defenders, but the Eagles' style of motion puts no stress on the defense. I thought that was interesting.
Well, it puts no stress on Luke Kuechly. It could put stress on others. Luke could.
Yeah, well, he was just talking about that there's different types of motion, and I think he was more like San Francisco's type of motion is stressful in a defense.
Well, he's talking about it's more of the CFL version. You see it from the Shanahan teams.
Right.
And you can move, you don't have to get, so they've started this. You can sort of get the head start, but they try to replicate it as much as possible, where you almost have this, you can't start going forward before the snap. But you see guys now rounding it off. It's really close. And at some stage, the NFL might make this a point of emphasis down the road, and they might start calling it. Because I saw somebody, boy, it was really well done, to the point they rounded it off at the moment the football was snapped, and it looked like almost a CFL play. And they've started doing that, and I think that's what Luke is talking about. That puts tremendous, especially when as he said, it's a playmaker. But that guy, I mean, you can search, I'm sure it's on YouTube. I mean, that is one of the guys who calls out plays like it doesn't matter what you're running. Yeah. He knew what was coming.
He was a tremendous football player.
The normal motion like the Eagles have been running is not going to affect a player like Luke Kuechly at all.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it can't affect players who don't have discipline. That's generally what you're trying to do. And that's what Jim Schwartz would explain to me. You're basically testing the eye discipline of the players, the defenders. And the players that are disciplined, it's not going to affect much. Players who aren't disciplined, it can affect.
Yeah. I thought that was good, though, listening to Luke Kuechly. Obviously, a guy who's he's maybe one of the better linebackers to ever play the game. Very, very good player. But John, back into a little bit of the offense. How much of this do you think is on Jalen then? I mean, people talk about, oh, it's the same as Nick. And by the way, I know you hate that comment, but Nick opened up that can of worms. Dude.
Oh,
That was
I said that. I said
I know
that
you did, but I'm
today.
just reminding you, what a dumb
No,
comment by
that
him.
was well. You can look at it two ways. If you want to defend Nick Sirianni, he's protecting his guys, number one.
which
So
is fair. I'm okay with him doing that.
that's a positive. But yeah, he shouldn't have gone down that route. He shouldn't have gone down that route. And I said it day one. And people will keep referring back to that. Well, he called that play, so he must have called this play.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a dumb thing to do.
How much
Very
of it
dumb
do you
thing
think
to
then
do.
do you think is on Jalen Hurts? I mean, people talk about the
A lot of
similarities
it,
in the
but
offense.
look, Lane Johnson. I'm going to look it up. Lane Johnson, 92 pass blocking snaps this year. 0 pressures allowed. 0 pressures allowed. Fred Johnson, 71 pass blocking snaps. 16 pressures allowed. What I said about New Orleans and Cleveland, same thing with the Eagles. It's boring. Nobody wants to talk about offensive linemen. But when you're harassed, nobody's going to look good at quarterback. Now, is that giving a pass to Jalen Hurts? No. The Jalen has not played well.
I think some of it has been seeing ghost with that, with when Lane's not out there. Because there was a breakdown on YouTube that somebody did. It's that franchise guy's his channel, and it was really a good breakdown. But he goes through some plays, and you can see Jalen still has a clean pocket, and he just something goes in his head that he goes into scramble mode. And I think maybe part of it is Lane's not out there, and he just doesn't trust his pocket.
Well, and that's just one game, but and it'll get better soon. Lane will be out there, and it'll get better. And then AJ hasn't been there for 3 games, so that is the bigger impact. But now you're going to have both back, and you're going to have Devontae back, who missed 1 game. And yeah, I mean, I don't, that makes a big difference, people. That's arguably, and I would argue, the 3 best pure football players the Eagles have.
Yeah.
And they weren't on the field in Tampa. They will be on the field against Cleveland, and hopefully for the rest of the season. And that's meaningful. Very, very meaningful. And everybody will get better because they're on the field. And the offense will be very good because they're on the field. And now you're back into, all right, pick your poison, Jim Swartz. What are you going to do? Who are you going to try to take away? Yeah, so, a lot of the offensive issues will fix themselves just by the talent on the field, which is why I'm still more focused on the defense. But I get why this team is pathetic offensively when A.J. Brown is not on the field. And it has to be better, but at this stage, it's not better. And all you can do is hope that he stays healthy for the rest of the season, because they are an abject disaster when he's not on the field.
Yeah, they really are. It's almost impressive how much
it is. It's ridiculous that a receiver. I even if you want to look at Jefferson or Chase or Hill, they don't, when they're out, those teams have other playmakers who can step up and do certain things. Not obviously not at the level of those players, but it doesn't look like the Eagles. You expected a quarterback, like look at Miami with Tua's not, I'm not even a Tua guy. I think he's a middle of the road quarterback, but he's middle of the road. That means one of the best 16 quarterbacks in the world. And the difference between him and the backups is pretty significant. to say the least.
Yeah,
It shouldn't be that way with a receiver, no matter how good the receiver is.
That's where I think people come to the quarterback, where they want to see the quarterback elevate the team like that, not the receiver. But that's the setup here in Philly. So, John, I mean, there's a lot of expectation. I think that this offense would potentially be more pro style with Kellen Moore. That doesn't seem to be the case. Do you think that's because that's what Jalen Hurts is good at, or that's what he likes, or your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, yes, that's what he's good at, and that's what he liked. I mean, the people who wanted basically to play action and have him under center, I mean, yeah, we're going to strip you of your football stripes. I mean, yeah, that's terrible. That's a terrible idea. Um, so you try to accentuate the strengths of your players. So why are you going to do what a player doesn't do well? That's my argument with Big Fangio and Bryce Up.
Right.
And I think it's a significant issue. If the Eagles had Jalen Hurts under center a bunch and are going traditional play action, yeah, you would not like that.
I think you're right about that. I think the concern is that Jalen hasn't looked great in the pocket. His pocket awareness hasn't been good, and you know there's some concern about that. Because look, John, the other reality that goes into the evaluation of Jalen Hurts, and that's from me, that's from all the fans, I think, is looking at the guys around him. And I know he hasn't had AJ for 3 games this year, but you know, you look at some of these quarterbacks around the league that are slicing and dicing and putting up yards, and I mean, most of them. 98% of them don't have the type of weapons that we have in Philly. And I think that puts even more pressure on Jalen to not, to be able to extract the most out of them that he can. And when he doesn't, I mean, it's just he's in the bullseye.
Yeah, but those games are outliers, right? You don't want to throw for 400 yards in the NFL because that generally means
You're
behind and you're trying to catch up and you're throwing. Like I brought up the fact that how can Brian Flores have a defense that's number 1 in the advanced statistics and number 3 in number 32 in passing defense? How is that possible? Well, it's possible because they've led in every game except for 3 minutes and 20 something seconds. That's it. So they're always playing from the lead. Teams are down by significant margins, and all they do is drop back and throw the football. As I mentioned, Rodgers threw it 50 times. Love almost threw it 60 times. You don't want quarterbacks. Thursday night, last Thursday night was the Kirk Cousins game. You're going to overtime. They're desperate. They're a second away from losing. Oh, he's got 500 yards. It's not fantasy football, man. You don't want your quarterback throwing for 500 yards. You might like it in the moment. It's not sustainable. And I think everybody points out, like, look at all the other games. Look at Josh Allen going 9 for 32 or whatever the hell it was.
Not good.
And again, if you don't look at Derek Carr with an offensive line versus Derek Carr without an offensive line.
Yeah, he hasn't been good.
Yeah, it's not sustainable, number 1. And so, the highs are like, would you like to have everything? You'd like to have everything because as you go through an NFL season, you're going to have to win games a bunch of different ways. And that generally tells the good teams from the bad teams, right? If you don't have your offense, like Sam Darnold played like crap in London, but they found a way to win the game. That's actually a positive. Kansas City's won a bunch of different ways over the years, winning Super Bowls. That's a positive. You find different ways to win. So it'd be nice to say, oh, can we go win a shootout? And I think the Eagles can when AJ's on the field, Devontae's on the field, Lane's on the field. They can win a shootout, but they're going to win it in a different way. They're not going to win it with 500 passing yards. They're going to win it with a bunch of big plays in the passing game, but also a bunch of big plays, extended plays, running the football by the quarterback. They're going to do it a little bit of a different way. But everybody gets excited when a guy throws for 500 yards, which has happened 13 times in the history. 500 yards and 4 touchdowns, 13 times in NFL history. It's not like it's common. So, I wouldn't stretch for it or stress that, oh, they can't do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the other part of it is that many believe, whether right or wrong, and I perhaps fall into this category as well, the better way to win long-term in the league is to be able to do it from the pocket. And sometimes Jalen struggles with being able to do it from the pocket. And you bring up the Kirk Cousins game, and while you're completely right, you don't want your quarterback throwing for 500 yards because it means you're behind every game. He's making Drake London and Darnell Mooney look like superstars, and they're no A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. There might be good players, but they're no A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and I think that's where people, whether right or wrong, like I said, that's where they start to wonder, what could be if Jalen was better from the pocket.
Well, he's had games where he's been tremendous from the pocket. Is the consistency there? No. Is he a high volume thrower? No. But again, I'd rather have Jalen Hurts than Kirk Cousins, even Kirk Cousins before the Achilles. And that's the guy I always use, because if you look at his consistency from the pocket and his accuracy, it's top tier, and it's been that way for over a decade. And he's got so many 4,000-yard seasons. He can do it in his sleep, as long as he's healthy. But there's a bunch of stuff he can't do. So I'd rather
even with this roster. You think you'd take Hurts over Kirk with this roster, the way it's set up?
With the Eagles roster, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Kirk's underrated. I had this argument with Jody a million times. He is so well respected around the league. Everybody knows how good he is at quarterback in this league, and that's what matters most. But there's also limitations, and I would rather have, in this era of football, a guy who can do both as far as mobility and throwing the football. And I think Jalen at his height can do both. Unfortunately, he's got to get back to where he was. Like the Jalen Hurts of the Super Bowl, that's plenty good enough. That's the ceiling. You've already seen the ceiling.
I don't. We haven't seen that in a little bit, but you're right. He was unbelievable in that game. There's no doubt. You cannot take that away from him.
I don't mean the game. I mean the season.
Jalen Hurts, but also the game.
Jalen Hurts was plenty good enough that season. Can he get back to that? He needs to get back to it. He's already proven he can do it. But I see no evidence that he's going to get back to it. That's the problem. But there's still a bunch of. I mean, I haven't done it in a while. I'll have to look at it. But I would still put Jalen probably 11, 12, somewhere in that range as far as NFL quarterbacks.
And that's where I would put him overall. I don't think that's where he's been through the start of the year. Now he's missing a lot of guys, so I get it, but I don't think.
Well, again, that's Derek Carr looks great when he has an offensive line. Doesn't. I'm taking everything into account. He's still very good. He's still very.
Well, let me ask you, because you just said, you take Hurts over Cousins, which I don't have a problem with. But you're set that basically then you believe that, because both quarterbacks, every quarterback has their flaws, right? Every quarterback is going to have some deficiency. You're saying that you'd rather have the deficiencies of Jalen Hurts and take the positives of Jalen than have the deficiencies of Kirk, which is he can't move and some of those other things.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, everybody's got flaws. You're trying.
Yeah,
So
that's what I mean.
I'm
You're
going
picking and
down the
choosing.
list. Jordan Love, I probably want more, and I'm probably jumping there, to be honest, because that's more upside than anything else. But I'd rather have Jordan Love. I'm thinking, no, I'd put Jalen ahead of Baker still. Brock Purdy, you can argue. I'd probably go Brock Purdy at this stage. That'll make Jody happy. Jared Goff's an interesting one, but I think I think everything's got to be perfect for him. I'd still go Jalen. Remember, what I'm saying here when I do this is they both have the same exact situation. And if they both have the same exact situation, I'd rather have Jalen Hurts. I'd still rather have Matthew Stafford. I like guys who understand how to play the position. And that's why.
Well, that's why I'm a little surprised that you said Jalen over Kirk. I'm not saying Jalen doesn't understand how to play the position, but he definitely has a more unconventional style.
No, he does. It definitely got a way to go, and Kirk's much more prepared to handle things.
Yeah,
but Kirk's got. Remember, the guys I'm going to put who know how to play, and the two I can tell you right off the bat are Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers. They have some mobility. They can do some things that Kirk can't. Kirk is so stationary, I think it becomes a problem. Justin Herbert, who's not playing well, I'd still take him. Patrick Mahomes is obvious. CJ Stroud is obvious. Lamar Jackson is obvious. It's very early, but I'd rather have Jaden Daniels, but that's just Josh Allen is obvious. Kyler Murray is very close. I know people get upset by that. Joe Burrow, I'd rather have.
But
Dak, you could make the argument. I'd rather have Jalen than Dak, but that's uber close. And I know that's a cop out because it's Eagles Cowboys. I'd rather have Jalen. And that's it. The entire league. And a lot of it's projection, obviously, with Jaden Daniels. I just love that particular player.
Jane Daniels can play. John, did you see that touchdown pass from the pocket?
Yeah, I mean, I love the player, and Caleb Williams is, he's got immense talent as well, but I'm not at that stage with him because he beat up on the worst team in football. But Jaden Daniels, yeah, I'm in John Gruden quarterback love with Jaden Daniels.
Have you seen his channel, John? Oh my gosh, is it good?
Yeah, I have seen parts of it, but
oh man, is it good?
Nobody falls in love and falls out of love with quarterbacks quicker than John Gruden.
I believe it, but man, his channel is tremendous. As a guy that does YouTube and stuff, I love watching John Gruden. His channel is really good. So good stuff there, John. We're gonna get through another commercial break. Actually, before we do that, let's get to the super chat. And then see it come in. James Carver, thank you, brother. Big $20 super chat there from James. James, appreciate you as always. He says, and remember how many people complained about AJ and his antics last year? It's crazy to realize had the Eagles traded AJ, this team would be dead in the water. He needs to retire here no matter what. AJ and CMC are the truest MVPs. I don't think they were ever going to trade AJ, James Carver, but I guess people talked about it before their contracts. It was like, oh, if you're going to pay Smitty, how do you keep them both? And, how he figured out a way to do it. But I will say to James's point, John, AJ Brown is like, is there any other? And I think obviously this year he's over CMC, but is there any other non-quarterback in the league that's this valuable to a team? It's unbelievable.
Well, I think you see how valuable Christian is. By the way, you know who you saw how valuable? I'm going to take credit for this one as well. Aaron Jones. What a football player. What a freaking football player. The minute he left that game was completely different. And by the way, he Randy Moss somebody on a wheel route. When I talked about receiving backs, he's going up, catching the football like he's a receiver. Anyway, unbelievable player. but he's aging and he's hurt. And that was the issue, and Green Bay's issue. Is he going to stay healthy? And maybe they're right. Maybe he's not going to stay healthy. But when he's on the field, it's pretty amazing the impact he has. And that's a guy nobody talks about. As far as receivers, it's hard to argue against AJ because of the impact he has on this team when he's not on the field. I don't think he's the best receiver in football, but I think other teams, Minnesota most notably, you're talking about Miami because you're talking about Tyreek Hill. And I also think Jamar Chase is phenomenal. But they're 1-4. Maybe it's the Eagles and Cowboys again with CD Lamb, because CD Lamb is all the Cowboys seem to have, and they have nothing else. But AJ is unbelievable, and he's the best pure football player on the Eagles. And yeah, some people have problem with his antics, whatever you want to call it. People are always, James, people are always going to have problem with everybody if they lose.
I think the AJ Brown, I think the AJ Brown antics thing is the most overrated thing in the world. Every time I look at AJ Brown, he's doing something good. I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see diva from him at all.
Well, not from a work ethic standpoint and that kind of stuff. And people don't get to see these guys behind the scenes. And the two most notable would be AJ and Slay. And it's, people can't understand why they're team captains. And a lot of people think Nick Sirianni's making them team captains because they're good. No, their teammates are voting them that because they have tremendous respect for them. But, they go on social media. They both had troubles on social media. That's 99% of the problem. You can't control people's perception of you. And for whatever reason, this generation can't get the hell away from social media.
Yeah, I don't have much of a problem with what AJ did. I thought Slays was a little bit, obnoxious, and I wasn't a fan of that. Also, what do you think of, I know you keep saying that, and part of me wonders, like, should it be that way? The team selecting the captains, like, should it be like that, or should there be a leader that's picking the captains? If you know what I'm saying.
Doug did it once. Doug picked him during the COVID year. That didn't work out because, guys weren't around. And that was a disastrous year. I don't think captains are that important. So, I don't know what the big deal is. But, yeah, I would leave it up to the players to name their captains. Why? I don't know why declaring captains would be a better way. I'll just say, if the team isn't voting the quarterback as a captain, you got a problem.
That's true. That's true.
And the Eagles in Jalen as a captain, so that's not an issue. But that's the only, who's the leaders on the field? The quarterback and really the middle linebacker. Or it could be nowadays. The league has changed so much. Sometimes it's a safety. As long as those guys are handling things on the field, those are the leaders of your football team that matter. I don't really care about the C. That's more of a hockey thing. Who cares?
Yeah.
Other than maybe it's cool for Jersey people to get to see. And
I have a hockey background. Maybe that's why I care about the captain.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a bigger deal in hockey for whatever reason. And I'm not a hockey guy, but in football, it's like, who cares? And they got 7 of them. How many they got? Half the freaking team as captains. Who cares?
Let's get to our commercial break. Appreciate everybody in the chat for being here this morning on Birds 365. Got a great crowd as always, so I appreciate all of you guys. Hit that like button. We're going to come back. I'm going to talk to John a little bit about the NFC East. Where are the Eagles looking right now in the NFC East? I know we're only 4 games under our belt, 5 games under the rest of their belts. I don't know when their bye weeks are around the NFC East, but, NFC East. I mean, we got 6 games versus the NFC East coming on. They're not going to be shoo-ins. I don't even think for the Giants is going to be a shoo-in. So we'll talk about that next on here on Birds 365. Hit that like button, everybody. Appreciate you all being here. We'll be right back in 3 minutes.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.